And I have two gospel readings today. I couldn't decide. Threw them both in. First is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 48. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And then from Matthew chapter 25, verses 40 through 45. And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, but Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? And he will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. I had two gospel readings today because I couldn't decide between them as to which fit better with the message I had in mind. So I was lazy. I just gave both of them to Keith to publish in the bulletin. In different ways, each reading promotes the core message that Jesus brought forth in the new covenant. That we express our love for God through the way we treat each other, with respect and kindness and civility. During this past Christmas season, I was somewhere where Christmas music was playing in the background. And Mahalia Jackson's rendition of Sweet Little Jesus Boy started playing, and I found myself thinking about the refrain. We didn't know it was you. Sweet little Jesus boy, they made you be born in a manger. Sweet little Jesus boy, we didn't know it was you. I was dwelling on that. We didn't know it was you. And then before long, was thinking about Milburn Drysdale. Do you remember Milburn Drysdale? Yes, right, George. He was the banker on the Beverly Hillbillies. How long did that show run? Like 10 seasons? Like I said, I was a child of the 60s television generation. So let me explain how I got from Bethlehem to the Beverly Hillbillies. And by the way, that would have been a good sermon title, but I didn't think of it until after the bulletins had been printed. Sweet little Jesus boy laments how the baby Jesus was born in a lowly manger. And later in life, he was persecuted and suffered for the sake of humanity. But the part of the song that says, we didn't know it was you, well, it kind of suggests that if we didn't know it was you, we would have treated you better. If we knew it was you, we would have provided the best accommodation. You'd had the best room in the inn. You have been exalted, worshipped, the manner that you deserved. We would have been downright obsequious. Yep, anything you want, sir. Can I freshen that wine up for you? Your feet look a little dirty. Do you want me to wash them for you, Jesus? Happy to do that. Well, as I said, as a card-carrying member of the television generation and a child who came to age in the 60s, for me, Milburn Drysdale was the epitome of obsequiousness. Played to perfection by Raymond Bailey, Drysdale was the greedy president of a large bank who was simultaneously cruel to his long-suffering secretary, Miss Hathaway, while being sickeningly pandering to Jed Clampett, the top depositor in his bank. And for those of you unfamiliar with the story, come and listen to a story about a man named Jed. Clampett was a backwards hillbilly who became a millionaire overnight when he struck oil on his farm. Drysdale managed Jed's money and fawned over him. But were it not for the money, Drysdale would have had nothing to do with Jed Clampett, wouldn't have even associated with someone like that. And now, I suddenly realize I'm about to draw a parallel between Jesus Christ and Jed Clampett, besides them just having the same initials. But here goes. Both of humble birth and both deserving of respect, not for what they can do to benefit you, but because they are both children of God. Okay. We as Christians acknowledge Jesus as the actual Son of God. But remember, he eschewed the power and the trappings that came with that position. Humble birth, humble existence, sweet little Jesus child. We didn't know it was you, but it shouldn't have mattered, because we should treat all of God's children with respect and reverence. This is why the gospel reading from Matthew chapter 25 seemed most appropriate. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. I think of this as the anonymity of God in practice. Imagine that everyone you encounter could be Jesus. In concept, treat everyone with respect and dignity because it's the proper thing to do, not because you expect some sort of personal benefit or reward for your behavior. It is for the benefit of all that we be civil with each other. So what does that have to do with technology? Isn't the title of the sermon Technology versus Civilization? Yes, it is. But I wanted to talk about civility first. That's the civilization part. Now we'll talk about technology. It must have been about 20 years ago. I was watching TV, and some news magazine. There was an interview with an actor and rapper, Tracy Morrow, better known as Ice-T. And I don't know why I was watching, because I'm not really a fan, but he was making the news over the controversy of some of his lyrics. I think he had a song out called Cop Killer, and he was trying to explain that. But in the interview, he talked about the distinction between technology and civilization. And that was not his original concept. I mean, he didn't come up with that, but that's the first time I recall taking note of it. To reiterate, civilization is the stage of human social and cultural development and organization that is considered most advanced. Technology is an integral part of civilization, but they are two separate things, and people often conflate and confuse the two. By and large, technology advances civilization. Think of roads and wheels and viaducts and architecture. Think of metallurgy and medicine, mechanization, rockets, planes, trains, and automobiles, radio, television, computers. But if technology was the only measure, our civilization might be considered the most advanced because of the exponential rise in achievements we've seen in the last 100 or so years. We went from horse and buggy to putting a man on the moon. Yet according to that list I found, now this is just a list, you can find all kind of lists on the internet, but according to the list I found at the top10s.com, the top 10 greatest civilizations of all time, the United States from 1776 to the present day is ranked 5th. Behind the Roman Empire, which was 27 BC to 1453 AD, ancient Egypt, which was 3150 BC to 30 BC, the British Empire, which was 1583 AD to present, and the Greek Empire, 800 BC to 600 AD. I don't know what criteria they use on the site to rate these. I don't know if it's people vote in. I didn't spend that much time there. But it's probably fair to assume that if you're ranking a civilization, part of the equation is going to be civility. So let me hazard a guess. Considering that, let me hazard a guess as to why our current civilization was pushed down on the list. Sure, we can take credit for one of the greatest technological achievements in the history of mankind. We split the atom. But what did we do with that technology? We built a bomb and dropped it on a heavily populated, predominantly civilian city. Twice. We probably lost points for that. Now, I'm not going to engage in the debate over whether the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were necessary. That's a topic for Georgie's brother. Greg Mitchell is the author of a dozen books, including Hiroshima in America, Atomic Cover-Up, and the recent award-winning The Beginning or the End, How Hollywood and America Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Greg also directed the documentary film Atomic Cover-Up and 2 other films for PBS. There's a plug for Greg. The should we have dropped the bomb question is Greg's bailiwick. I don't want to get into that, but I will say this. Justifiable or not, there is no context in which you could argue that dropping a nuclear bomb on a populated city is civil behavior. That being the case, technology doesn't always advance civilization, does it? And may actually set it back in some aspects. In fact, I think we're living in a time right now when a certain technology may be inhibiting the social development of our current civilization. And ironically, that technology is called social media. And here's how I see it. The personal computer and the internet heralded a new age in communication, information, and the sharing of ideas. It was supposed to bring us together as a global community, but instead, it seems to be driving us apart. There was a time before cable TV or the internet when there were only 3 major television networks. If you wanted to watch the evening national news, you turned into, Huntley and Brinkley on NBC, Peter Jennings on ABC, and good old Walter Cronkite, Uncle Walt. And by the way, Walter Cronkite was a flaming liberal, but nobody knew that. He delivered the news. He didn't put his politics into it. Sure, there were differences of opinion between the political parties, but the news was just the news. Any bias from the reporters went largely unnoticed. But now we have 24-hour cable news channels whose main output, in my opinion, is not news. It's opinion and outrage. More and more people these days completely bypass the major news outlets because they don't trust them anymore. And instead, they get all their news from sources like Facebook and Telegram and X, formerly Twitter. The assumption about the internet in its infancy and these social platforms that it spawned was that the truth would bubble to the surface and falsehoods would be debunked by consensus and the majority. But the internet is not one big room. It fractured into multiple rooms, and users migrated to where they felt comfortable. Their own bubbles with like-minded people and plenty of confirmation bias. There is some sense of safety on social platforms that allows people to post things that they just wouldn't say to a person face to face. Okay, it's like if you're driving in a car and somebody cuts you off in traffic, you might lean on the horn and shout at them, "Hey, you idiot!" Get away with that. Because you're in your car, they're not likely to stop. You're relatively safe. But if you're on an elevator and the door's closed and somebody bumps into you and you're trapped in with them, you're not likely to turn to them 3 inches from their face and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" You're not likely to do that. You're going to be civil. The sense of safety, the veritable anonymity on the internet allows people to dismiss the normal rules of civility. Therefore, I see social media as a technology that just might set civilization back rather than advancing it. Do I think social media should be banned? Of course not. But I guess I'm just a little worried because, well, we're at a controversial time. This is a presidential election year, and our nation is already politically fractured. People are drawing up sides. If we abandon civility, things could get bad. And the fun starts tomorrow with the first Republican caucus in Iowa. I hope and pray that everyone can be civil with one another. It's a lot to hope for, but perhaps we can advance our civilization if everyone behaves like God wants us to behave. You've heard it said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven.